Hello and welcome to the KnitandGrace podcast. This is episode 12. Hello and welcome back if you are a returning viewer. If you are new here, my name is Mia and I am the maker behind KnitandGrace. And today I bring you the monthly podcast episode. I apologize that it is a week late, but last week was a holiday weekend here in the US and Canada. It was Labor Day for both of us, and I just wanted to relax a bit and not have an episode to film, and so the podcast is coming to you guys a little bit late. Also, in terms of my monthly filming schedule, if you have been here for a while, you will have noticed that over the summer I was putting out videos pretty much on a weekly basis, and now that the fall is here and there's less sunlight and all that stuff, we will be resuming our every other week schedule for episodes. And so for those of you who have been here for a while, you already know, but I always put out a monthly podcast episode, so typically the first Sunday of every month, and then I will put out another video throughout the month. The exception will be October, because October there's a lot of Rhinebeck related materials, but typically I do put out 2 videos a month, so one traditional knitting podcast episode, which is this one, and then another just like episode, either a knit and chat or a making journal or whatever I have on my mind at any given time. I'll put out an extra episode in the month. So I think that's the logistics of the podcast episodes and the intro. In terms of the episode today, traditional podcast style, if you are new here, which means that I will talk about what I'm wearing, my finished objects since we last spoke, my works in progress, any acquisitions, and then my making plans for the upcoming month. So essentially, every month that you're seeing this is kind of like a what I made the month before. So even though this is my September podcast episode, this is everything that I knit in the month of August. So we'll go ahead and jump right in, because as always, I'm always like, oh, I don't have tons to talk about today, and then we end up talking for like over an hour. So we will start with what I'm wearing today, which is my Ranunculus. And so this is the Ranunculus, which is a pattern by Midori Hirose, and this was featured as a finished object in last month's podcast episode. And yeah, I'll just give you very basic information on this one since it was already featured on the podcast, but I knit it in Joanne Fabrics, their house line KNC, the Essential line, and so that is a 100% unmercerized cotton. It's a DK weight cotton, and I used size 8 needles as my main needle, and I knit it at a tighter gauge of about 16 stitches. I've just washed it, so it is a little bit tighter on me. It will like shrink up a little bit when it comes out of the wash, but once I wear it a time or two, it'll relax back out to its regular size. So you may notice it looks a tiny bit tight around the sleeves, but that's just because it just came out of the wash. So after probably by the end of the day today, it will have relaxed quite a bit. Really enjoyed this yarn. I have worn this Ranunculus to death. Even in really hot weather, so like even on some like over 80-degree muggy humid days, I've worn it and I have been completely comfortable. It actually was pretty moisture wicking one day when I was sweating quite a bit, which was nice. And yeah, and I've popped it in the wash a couple times. With my summer knits, I pop them in the regular cold cycle in a garment bag, and then I just wash it in the regular cold cycle, and then I lay them out flat to dry. I don't believe that this one is machine dryable, but I don't I do have some summer yarns that are machine dryable, and I don't dry them either, just because I know cotton does have a tendency to shrink, and so I don't want any of my garments to overly shrink, especially because my summer garments I tend to knit with less positive ease, if any, so that they fit me. But that is a very long tangent to explain to you what I'm wearing today. So we can jump right into the finished objects. So my first finished object is a repeat to the podcast. So it was featured in last month's episode as a whip, and it is the Linnaeus hat by Teti Lutzak. And so this is what it looks like. And yeah, so this was a test knit for Teti. She has a whole line of Linnaeus patterns. So she has the sweater, the shawl, and then now she will be coming out with the hat. The hat pattern has not been released yet, but I know it should be released in the coming weeks. And I already have both the shawl and the sweater patterns, and I wanted to knit the hat sort of as a way to just, you know, quickly learn the skills that are part of the sweater and the shawl, because I do eventually want to knit them. And then I did need a little bit of a palette cleanser. So for this little hat, I knit it using Knitandgrace. So Onarakier is the yarn company, and they produce an unspun yarn called Knitandgrace. And so the main color is Menning, which is a brown. And even though it is a brown, it's actually not a natural brown. It is a dyed colorway. And then I held it together with Woolen Twine Cloud in the color Brown Bear. And then for my little floral floats, I used two contrasting colors of Knitandgrace that I already had in stash. So the topmost color is Harden, which is an orangey color, and the bottom color is Vanessa, which is a deep terracotta purpley pink color. And so yeah, I had a lot of fun knitting this up. I knitted it up in 2 days. So I think when I had posted the last podcast episode, I was I had just finished the second rosette, and I just had to close it up, if I remember correctly. And it does have like a really deep ribbed brim, so you can fold it up. And yeah, I absolutely love it. I used size 3 or 3.25 millimeter needles, and if I'm looking down, I'm just looking at my notes. And I used a very minimal amount of yarn. So, and my yardage and my yarn and all of that will be in my Ravelry project page, which is linked down below. And then I will, of course, blast this out on my Instagram. If you don't follow me there, be sure to do so. That's also linked below once the pattern is actually released. But yeah, I really enjoyed knitting this one. It was a super quick knit. Again, I knitted it in 2 days. Hats are just really nice palette cleansers, and I have so many hats, and I just rotate them, and then sometimes I'll just give them away. And yeah, I just really loved working on this, and it was just, you know, something nice to pass the time. So the next project that I finished in the month of August was the Pearl Soho dumpling bag. And it doesn't have anything in it right now, so it's pretty flat. And this is a free pattern on Pearl Soho's website. This is what it looks like. And so it's just like a knot bag, so that you just put the long end through the short end, and then you can carry it on your wrist. And I'll also insert a picture of me sort of modeling it, where I put like a skein of yarn in it so you can kind of see. So yeah, this one I knit in linen quill that just keeps on giving. I still have so much linen quill in my stash. If you've been following me for a while, you know I've been trying to use this linen quill forever. I bought one of each of these colors. Was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 colors for my Vertices Unite, which I knit last year for Rhinebeck. And I still had tons of yarn left over for most of the colors, except for the white, which was my main color. I didn't have as much left over, but I just keep trying to use up this yarn, and it's just like I've used it in my Strya recently. I actually gifted some as part of a giveaway as well. It just keeps on giving. I still have some more. So the colors that I used in the dumpling bag are Kiln Red, Stillwater Blue, Lychee Pink, Pale Oats, Turmeric Yellow, and Peony Pink. And that is my little dumpling bag. This pattern is originally designed in their linen yarn, so it's like 100% linen, which is, I believe it might be a DK, or it might be a fingering weight, and they also held it double. But this is a DK weight pattern, so I did hold it double, and it is knit on US 5 needles. Now, my gauge is a bit tighter than the gauge that they call for in the pattern. And so the pattern does call for a US 5 needle, which I did use, but my gauge is definitely a little bit tighter, and that just has to be due with the fact that linen quill is not 100% linen, so it does have wool and, what is it? Wool and alpaca? Let me look it up. I should probably have that down. Let's see. It is, yeah, 15% linen, 35% alpaca, 50% wool. So it is going to naturally knit up at a tighter gauge than a linen yarn, 100% plant fiber yarn. And that was fine by me because I did want a little bit of a denser fabric. And so I haven't used it yet, but I plan on using this for knitting and walking, and I could just stick a little sock project in here and then take it on the go. This would also be nice just to have like as a little bag just in general. And yeah, I absolutely loved it, and it was a really quick knit, and this one knit up in about 2 days as well. So the next project that I finished in August is a new one to the podcast because I casted it on and casted it off in the month of August, and actually I only took 4 days to knit it. And it is the Meditative Wrap by Amy Sher. So this is what it looks like. It's an asymmetrical triangle wrap. And I'll also insert a picture of my dress form Mimi wearing it. I haven't actually taken any FO pictures of this, and I will be taking those like the week after this, or the week actually after this goes up. So next weekend we are going to our cousin's wedding, and so it is just a beautiful lace shawl. And so the way that it starts is it actually starts at the widest point, and then you just keep decreasing along one edge all the way to the bind off here. And yeah, so in terms of the shawl, again, it is the Meditative Shawl by Amy Sher, and this shawl was designed in Woolen Twine Thrive, which is an unspun yarn, and I did actually knit mine in Woolen Twine Thrive, although Amy, I think, designed theirs in the linen colorway, which was from earlier in the year, and so I knit mine up in the barley colorway, which was part of the June collection. So Eula typically releases Thrive a few times a year. It's an unspun yarn that she has specially milled for her, and then she'll release it in 2 colorways at a time. And so I was able to pick up both of the colorways, which you'll see in my next project in the June update. And so I knew that I actually had picked this up with Amy's pattern in mind, but I didn't actually plan on knitting it until later in the year. And funny enough, the wedding that we're going to next week, which is where I'll be able to take pictures of this, is the reason why I decided to knit it up so quickly. I am sewing myself a dress for our cousin's wedding. We will be wedding guests at her wedding, and I had to make some really major adjustments to the bodice of the dress, and including the arm side, and I didn't want to like alter the sleeve pattern. I was originally going to do like a bishop sleeve, and it was just going to be too much work in the short amount of time that I have to sew up the dress. So I'm going to do a shorter sleeve version of the dress, which means then I would need a wrap because we are going to be in Vermont. I think the highs for the day are going to be in the mid-70s, so it won't be too cold, but it does get cold at night, and the wedding is later in the afternoon. So that is why I decided to cast this on and cast it off so quickly. Typically, a shawl takes me about a week to 2 weeks to knit up, but this one only took me 4 days, and part of that was because, unfortunately, I had a bit of insomnia, so I got in, on one of the days, I actually got in between 3 hours of insomnia knitting and my commute, which is an hour each way to and from work. I got in 5 hours of knitting, and I actually finished it that day, which happened to be like 4 days after I casted it on. But yeah, so the yarn is Woolen Twine Thrive, which is an unspun. It is held double. Thrive is a little bit of a thicker unspun yarn. It's more of a DK weight than it is a fingering weight, although it is still classified as a fingering weight, I think. And I used the recommended needle size, which is a US 9, which I believe, let's see, I have that here, is a 5.5 millimeter needle. And it blocked pretty much to the specifications that Amy has in the schematics. I think that mine was maybe just a couple inches wider and longer, but not by much. So my gauge was obviously just a little bit bigger, but that could also have just been because each spin of an unspun yarn is different. So it could just be that this one may have been either thinner or thicker than the one that they used for their sample. And so yeah, so it ended up being pretty much bang on the measurements. I think it was like, I think the shawl is supposed to be like 32 across the cast on, and then like 50 something tall, and I think mine was more like 36 by 60 or something like that. So it was really pretty much spot on. And I used 225 grams, I want to say. Yeah, 225 grams, so just under 3 plates of the Woolen Twine for this one. So this is a really good one if you just have some leftovers of any unspun yarn. Also, I think a couple people that tested it for her also used like a Gilead yarn, the Gilead yarn, I think, Durum Natura, maybe Gilead or maybe Cyrano, but they used a woolen spun yarn as well, so you can use it in a woolen spun, and Amy does have yardage for both, so you know how much weight you need in terms of if you're knitting it with an unspun, or you know how much yardage you need if you're knitting it with a woolen spun, which is the 2 recommended types of yarn to knit this shawl in. And then my last finished object that I have to show you for the month, I actually just finished last night. So technically it was finished in September, but because I am filming this on September 9th, it counts as a finished object since the last podcast. And that is my tuku by Weechin of the Petite Knitter. And so this is what it looks like folded up. And so that is the sweater. I hope that you can see it. So since I just finished this last night, I don't have FO pictures. I'll try to pop it on Mimi and take a picture of her wearing the sweater. I'll probably take it up to Vermont with us so that I can take some pictures in hopefully fall foliage. I think Vermont is high enough that the fall foliage has started to hit there. So hoping that we do see a little bit of fall foliage this weekend coming up. And so yeah, so again, this is the tuku by Weechin of the Petite Knitter. And again, I knit this in Woolen Twine Thrive. And so you see my contrast here. Contrast color is the color Barley, which is that same color as the Meditative Wrap. And the main color is the color Malt, which is this deep brown color. And so what I love about Eula's unspun yarns is that they are undyed. So this is the natural color of the yarns that are being used. And this is an absolutely stunning, stunning pattern. For this one, I knit the 6th size, which is meant to be 51 inches, and then I've just taken my post-blocking measurements, and the yoke did grow quite a bit. And part of that is that I did go up a needle size for the yoke, so I did get gauge on the recommended needle, which is a size 3 or 3.25, and then I did the yoke, the colorwork yoke, in a size 4 or a 3.5 millimeter needle, because it is unspun. Now that said, this was my first time doing was this my first time doing colorwork in unspun? I think so. I think this is like my first time doing proper colorwork in an unspun yarn, and because I was holding it single, I definitely wanted to go up. So typically I do always go up when I knit colorwork for the colorwork section, because my colorwork does tend to be a little tighter. Now, because I was knitting it in an unspun yarn, and because there were some very long floats, I think I was very cognizant of that, and then I probably knit the colorwork a lot looser than I normally would. So my colorwork blocked out quite aggressively. So when I took the measurements of the sweater before I blocked it, you know, my body circumference, so like, or the width across the underarms here, was 24 inches. So that means a circumference of 48 inches. So I knew that, you know, at least it would block out to the 51, which is what I expected. And then when I took my measurements after I blocked it, it came out to 28 inches, which is 56 inches circumference. So that's an extra 5 inches, which I believe is the next size up. That said, I did try it on, and I love the way it fits across the front and the body. And I think that this is something that I mentioned in my last podcast when I talked about this. I think that there are too many stitches allocated to the sleeves. And I still think that. For the larger sizes at least. Because again, because you are knitting a larger size and it is a circular yoke, when you have all of these stitches for the sleeve, and I actually did not change the decrease rate for this one. So I actually decreased exactly as mentioned in the pattern. So you can see how deep the bicep is here and how quickly it decreases down to the wrist. And I think that, at least for me, and I know some people have larger biceps, I have a pretty, you know, regular sized bicep to bust circumference. I could have used with a lot less stitches in the sleeves, and then have a more gradual decrease rate. So it's actually forming a little bit of a bump here that you can see. And so again, when I'm wearing it, and I tried it on earlier today, it looks really great. I mean, it's definitely more oversized than I intended it to be, because it's like 10 inches of positive ease for me. But it still looks really nice, like in terms of like the color work blocked out beautifully. It lays really nicely across the front, and down. It just has this on the web. Okay. My watch Siri decided to go off. But as I mentioned, so it fits really nicely across the front, the body. It's definitely a little bit more ease than I intended to, but it's not like an exorbitant amount of ease. I am just not happy with the way it sits across the bicep. So I think what I'm going to do is I am going to try to block it out a little bit more aggressively, like with the steamer, just the top of the bicep, to make it a little bit more, not as big of a transition. And then I think it'll still be a little baggy at the, it's not even baggy at the shoulders. It actually fits really nice up until here. And then it's like a bump, and then the sleeve. So, and that just means that there's just too many sleeve stitches, unfortunately. I definitely would knit this again. I would definitely size down, and then what I would do is like allocate more stitches to the body and less stitches to the sleeve. So I'd probably do the next size down. I still like the amount of ease that I have. I would still want a little bit more ease in the body, but I personally don't like a lot of ease in my sleeves. I have a sensory issue where if I have baggy sleeves, it drives me insane. So I am going to try to just steam it out a little bit to make the transition a little less aggressive. And otherwise, I mean, it's a beautiful sweater and it fits me great otherwise, and I will definitely be wearing it. So that is just my only complaint with the pattern. And unfortunately, that also just happens to be, I wouldn't say necessarily common, but it is something that can happen in circular yoke sweaters for the larger size ranges. And it is what it is, which is why I personally like a fit that's a circular yoke with then raglan increases after the circular yoke, because I feel that then I can really adjust how everything fits, which actually is why I love the Ranunculus, because that is actually the construction of the Ranunculus. But yeah, so I talked about the yarn, I talked about the sizing. Yeah, I think that is everything that I have to say about this sweater. So now we are moving on to works in progress, and the first project that I have to show you is my tendril, which is a test knit for Sophie of the Knit Pearl Girl, and this also happens to be the item that I am knitting for my cal that I'm running, or make along that I'm running on the channel and on Instagram. So if you don't know about the make along I'm running, it is using Lion Brand Fisherman's wool, and I am running it all the way until almost the end of October, until I think it's like October 28th, 27th or 28th. But I will link my video going over the cal up above. And unfortunately, I haven't made tons of progress on this for two reasons. One is that my main project for the month of August was actually a sample, which I have not shown you here because it is a secret sample and it has since been sent back to Barocco. So I am on the Barocco sample knitter roster. So every season I get asked if I would like to knit a sample for them, and then depending on my availability I do or I don't, and I did this year. And that was my main project for August. So even though you see that I have a lot of finished objects, most of them either were started and finished at the very beginning of the month, or were started and finished at the very end of the month, like within the last week. And so my two small projects, they both took 2 days each, so that's why I had those. And then the tuku, I actually only had one sleeve and a little bit of the body to go, and then the meditative wrap. So that's why it looks like I have lots of finished objects, but this is actually not a lot of knitting for me in a specific month, and that's because the entire month I was knitting on a very, very large sample. So I didn't really get much knitting on anything else. But at the very beginning of the month, I did cast on my tendril, and yeah, so I don't know where I was going with that. And so I am holding it in this beautiful bag that was gifted to me by the lovely Cece of Stitch Witchcraft for my birthday. And this is a bag from Pajauta Makes, I believe is how you pronounce the Maker store. And these are beautiful linen bags that are hand embroidered, and Cece knows like that I have lusted over these bags but would never buy one for myself, and she, in her sneaky ways, decided to buy me one for my birthday. So thank you, Cece. So that's what the embroidery looks like. And so it's holding my tendril. And so you can see here, this is the very beginnings of the tendril. This is a drop shoulder sweater design. And so with drop shoulder sweaters, you start with the back. And so I've knit most of the back here, and I only have a few more rows. So it looks like a trapezoid, which is not very easy to show you because it's all curled up on itself. But essentially regular drop shoulder construction, where you start at the back neck, you increase for the shoulders, and you knit down, and then you then pick up the fronts, knit down, and then you join in the round and knit down. So it's a very typical drop shoulder construction. The nice thing about this one is that it has like this really nice lightning bolt cable detail on the shoulders in the front. And so the reason I am not further along on this is twofold. One was the sample, and two is the fact that I don't test knit for European designers very often. And the centimeters and the inches got me. So I'm used to American designers will have the inches and then the centimeters. But European designers will have the centimeters and then the inches. And so I was like, zooming along, because I'm knitting this on size 8 needles, which is what, 4.5 or 5 millimeter needles. So this is 5 millimeter needles. So I was like zooming. And then I got to the point where you just knit, after your shoulder increases, you just knit, essentially the armhole depth. And I read it as 13 inches. Now, folks, it was 13 centimeters, which is 5 inches. So the difference between 5 inches and 13 inches is a lot. And honestly, when I had to rip back, it just hurt my soul, and I put it on timeout. It is what it is. The good thing is that this is not due until the end of October. So I have plenty of time to knit on this, and now it's being picked up as one of my 2 main projects. But yeah, it got put in timeout because that literally just, it broke me for a good number of days. I just couldn't even knit. I was just so upset. I was so upset. And you know, the whole time as I was knitting it, I was like, wow, this is a really deep armhole. 13 inches, 13 inches, 13 inches. And you know, I should have really thought about that, you know. But I didn't, and I just kept going, and then I realized it was 13 centimeters, and so yeah, I mean, it is what it is, right? So for this one, let's see. So just to show you all what that's looking like. So this is my Lion Brand Fisherman's Wool. This is the color Oatmeal, I want to say. And I do center pull. So I'm center pulling. So when I had to rip back, this is the amount of yarn that I ripped back. Yeah. That is how much yarn I knit that I did not need to knit. Ah! But anyways, I'm holding it double with Drops Kid Silk, and I don't remember the colors. Let's see if I can quickly pull it up on my Rabbit app. No, I have not started the project yet in my Ravelry, so I'll have to start the project so that I can post the link for you all to see before this. But yeah, so I'm using Kid Silk. I think it's like almond something is the color. Drops Kid Silk, and then Lion Brand Fisherman's Wool, because it is the Fisherman's Wool cow, for my main color. So this will now become one of my main projects for the month. And actually, because we are driving up to Vermont, my hope and plan is I actually have 2 test knits now, because surprise, surprise, I signed up for another test knit. So my hope is to get both of these projects to have the back and the front finish, so to get to the join for the body. And then the drive up to Vermont is 5 hours, and the drive back down from Vermont will be 5 hours. So I'm hoping that I can then finish the body for both of these, or at least a good chunk of the body for both of these next weekend. So that is the Tendril, which is a test knit for Sophie of the Knit Pearl Girl, and I believe this one is going to be released on October 29th, so in time for my next podcast episode, so I'll be able to show you all the details there. And I am actually filming a project journal dedicated to this project as part of the make-along that I'm hosting. So with that, I'll show you the next test knit, which also happens to be a drop shoulder sweater construction, although it is slightly different because it is more of a Gansey construction. And I'm holding that one in this project bag that I made a few summers ago. And so this is using all leftovers of various linens and linen blends from some of my summer dresses that I have. And so you'll recognize some of these fabrics, and then I have like this faux leather bottom here. And the pattern that I use for my project bags most often is the Kato Project Bag, which is this pattern, and I will link it down below. And so I have a project here. And so this has definitely been flying off the needles. I casted this on last night. So when you're seeing this, 2 nights ago. So my husband and I have decided that because it is fall, even if it is not fall outside, it is 90 degrees outside, which is why I'm wearing a summer top still. But you know, in my head it's fall. I've changed to like my fall Gilmore Girls poster that I have in my house, all that stuff. We've decided to rewatch Lord of the Rings, and he's watched a few of the Hobbit series I have not. So we're restarting with Lord of the Rings trilogy, and then we're going through The Hobbit and all that kind of stuff. So really exciting. I think it's going to be the perfect just like fall winter situation. Also, my husband and I both can't sit and like watch a 3+ hour long movie in one sitting, so at least at home. So we did go see Oppenheimer, which was so good. So we are watching the extended cuts because this is the first time rewatching for both of us, and so we're rewatching the extended cuts on HBO Max, and I think we got through 2 hours last night of the Fellowship. And so I casted on my test knit for Rebecca of the Crayabea podcast, and this is my first test knit for her, and I'm so excited. And it is the Stick Season sweater. And so this is a pattern that she's putting out in collaboration with Explorer Knits, I want to say. And so this is what I have so far. So this is the back of the sweater. Let's see if you can see that. It has like this really nice texture detail. I also just realized that I like placed the camera really far back today. A little farther back than normal. But again, it is a drop shoulder Gansey construction. So again, you start with like that trapezoid, and this one's a little bit easier to see because I've started picking up the shoulders. So this is the back is completely finished. And then I just picked up and finished the left front. And so now I've picked up just the stitches for the right front. And so I'll knit like the right front, the right shoulder, and then you attach the fronts, and then you knit down the front, and then you attach in the round. Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful sweater. It has a lot of really nice details. Like it has a rib detail that goes all the way from the back front. So this, let's see if I can stretch it out. This rib detail right here, I hope you can see that, actually goes all the way down the side of the sweater to the side seam. So it gives it like a faux seam. And it's actually, you know, continues into the body ribbing, I believe. And yeah, I mean, I'm like so excited to finally have made it into a test knit for Rebecca. I've applied a couple of times, but I know her test knits like fill up super fast. So what to say about this one? I am using Primrose Yarn Co. Rowan DK. And so this is a 60-40 blend of superwash wool, so superwash American wool with non-superwash American wool. And so they are a local both yarn producer and dyer, so they hand dye all their yarns, and it's milled locally to me. They're in Pennsylvania, just like about 2 hours away from me. So all of the yarn is milled in Pennsylvania, and it's also dyed in Pennsylvania. And I think they may use one of the same mills that Brooklyn Tweed uses. But yeah, so in terms of the yarn itself, you reading up a little bit more on it, because when you think about it, you're like, oh, why is it partially superwash and partially non-superwash wool? And it's really interesting when you read up on it on their website, and essentially it's because they want the wool to have toothiness and have the, you know, and be able to be used for color work. Also the fact that it has non-superwash with the superwash wool. If you know anything about superwash garments, they tend to really grow a lot. So the fact that it has non-superwash keeps the yarn from blooming excessively. So it's a good garment for both sort of the easeability of having some of that superwash content and being soft and easy to care for, but then the non-superwash helps for it to be a little bit toothy, a little bit more grippy. It'll help fill in if you're using it for color work, because typically you don't want to use a superwash for color work. You can, it may just not have the same sort of filling in factors, the bloom. And then it helps keep the garment, keep its shape, because it does have that non-superwash in it. So I really went a little bit down the rabbit hole reading the website, and you can definitely do so. I also recently learned, and so this is yarn that I picked up at Rhinebeck 2021. So I'm actually really excited that I'm finally knitting it up before I go to Rhinebeck 2023, and then I'll wear it at Rhinebeck, hopefully, if it's not too hot, which since it's 90 degrees in September, it's not boding well for Rhinebeck. But if it's not too hot, I really look forward to wearing it, and it's obviously something that's been in my stash for quite some while. So I'm really excited to be knitting it up and to be meeting Rebecca and all that jazz. So really excited about it. I am using a size 6 needle for the texture portion, which is a 4mm needle, right? Yeah, I think so. And then I'll use a size 7 for the body, which is a 4.5mm needle, and which I think is like a 0.5 millimeter up from the needles that she used for her sample. I think she used a 3.5 and a 4, so I'm using a 4 and a 4.5. But yeah, it's a DK weight yarn. It's really beautiful. It does have some heathering in it. It's a semi-solid. It definitely has very visible heathering that you can see to your naked eye. And so sometimes I will wing it with hand-dyed yarns and not do helical knitting. But for this one, I will not be doing that, because it will be very obvious if I have any dye lot discrepancies. So what I've done is the back was knit in one skein, which I still have some left over of, and then I'm knitting the front in the second skein, so I'll knit the entire front in the second skein, and then when I join in the round, I will start my helical knitting all the way down. So that way, if there are any dye lot discrepancies, that will take care of that. Visually you can't tell if there are, and usually you can. It's usually once you knit it and wet it or something, and all of a sudden you see a huge stripe. But again, what makes me extra cautious is the fact that there is quite visible heathering, and there is here. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see this, but right here, you see right there? That's one piece that's very obvious, but you can see there's very visible heathering to this yarn, because it is a semi-solid. And so I'm just gonna save myself the heartache and be good and do it right the first time. So that is a lot to say about my stick season sweater. I feel like I just keep going on these tangents. And then I will get to my last work in progress, which is in this basket, and will now have to be taken out of this basket. But it is the Heirloom Quilt Cardigan by Katrin Seeberger. And so this is the cardigan that has taken the knitting community by storm this fall. This is the It cardigan, and I fell into the trap, and I am knitting it up. And so what I'm doing for this one is I am using all of my leftovers and Lucky Charms from my Nutidin projects. And so I'm holding Nutidin double. So the pattern does call for a fingering weight held double. So I'm knitting an unspun yarn held double. My gauge is off, but that's perfectly fine. I did want to have a slightly different modification. So the way that I'm knitting this is, the way that the pattern is there are 3 sizes. And each size is knit like each size has a corresponding square pattern that will give you the square. And so, you know, you kind of make a square to see if you're on gauge. So that's kind of like your practice. And so I made the square for the second size, and I got the gauge for the square for the third size, which I knew was going to be too big. So then I made the square for the first size, and I got a gauge, like my square finished measurements was somewhere between the first and second size. So the first size I want to say is like 50-inch circumference, and the second size is a 70-inch circumference. So it's a very big difference. And my bust is 46 inches. So I knew I wanted more ease than the 50-inch, but I didn't want as much ease as the 70-inch. And so the way that I've calculated it is that based on my measurements of my squares, which again I'll link to my Ravelry notes below so you can see all of that, I will end up with a cardigan that is a 60-inch circumference. So that's going to give me 14 inches of positive ease. And so I have finished all of my squares, and I will show you those. And so I'll just really quickly just like show you guys how these look. And I'll probably show you all like one with a lot of contrast so you can see what it is. But essentially, these are my squares. There are 36 of them. And what I've done is each color combination I've made 2 squares, so the opposite. So like for instance, this color combo is Vanessa and Gillingroa. So I made one with Vanessa as the main and then one with Gillingroa as the main. So that's kind of how I've done that. So that's that one. This one is, these two are Infinitive and Gillingroa. Then we have Vanessa and Use from 2021, I want to say. Yeah, this is Use from 2021, not Use from 2022. This is Karna and Duvkula. This is Sade and Antonella. This is Antonella and Hardin, which both Sade and Antonella and Hardin, I think, are in the running for my favorite combo. This is Sade and Use from 2021. Then this is Vanessa and Karna. Then we have Infinitive and Inenrendet Faller. It's the one that's like before the rain. And this is Hardin and Inenrendet Faller. Then we have Hardin and Yarnvelia. So this is a low contrast one. This is Vanessa and Duvkula. So this is one where you can really see the little quilt block square. Then I have, this is Sade and Grood. Then this is Yarnvelia and Duvkula. This is Antonella and Karna. This is Vanessa and Grood. This is Infinitive and Hardin. This is another one that's a favorite of mine. This is very intense. And then this is Infinitive and Karna. So I'll hold these up side by side so you can kind of see more clearly what that looks like from an opposites perspective. So yeah, so you knit 36 of those. I knit them on straights. I found it much easier to knit it on straights. I did knit my first one on circular needles, and it was pretty hard to do the flat intarsia on circular needles. So that is one thing I recommend if you are knitting this pattern, is to knit the squares on straight needles. Now the rest of the pattern I will knit on like my regular circular needles. So now what I have to do is you seam them all together, and there's a diagram for how you have to seam them together, you know, to make your back panels and your two front panels, and then you pick up for the sleeves, and then you pick up the hem and the collar of the cardigan. So now I just have to seam all 36 of these squares. That said, I am about 2 weeks ahead of when I thought I would finish these, because I had initially meant to just do 1 square a day. But you know, some days I did more, some days I didn't do any, so I am ahead. And then the main color that I'm going to use for the cardigan is Gillingroa, which is this orangey yellow gray. And so this is the color that I'm going to use for the sleeves and the bands. So I had just, you know, sort of pre-balled up all these random balls of Knitand, held double, and then I would just like pick 2 colors that I thought looked good together and put them together. The only thing that I didn't do is I didn't want to do like 2 cool colors, or not cool, but like brown and green together, because those aren't really my colors. So I did mix them in with like some of the purples and pinks that are more my colors. And yeah, that's what that looks like. So those are all of the works in progress or WIPs for the month. And I don't have any acquisitions, so I'm really excited about that. I was able to stick to my no-buy so far this summer. There's still 1 month to go before Rhinebeck, so I don't want to get too confident. But so far, I've stuck to my no-buy. If you have watched the podcast before, you know that in June, at the beginning of June, I decided that I was not going to purchase any more yarn until Rhinebeck, and with the exception of the Lion Brand Fisherman's Wool that I knew I was going to purchase for the knit along, because that was a test knit and sort of a knit along, and I knew that that was going to happen. So with the exception of that yarn, I set a goal for myself not to buy any yarn, and I have stuck to it. I will say I was very close to buying yarn for my stick season, but I decided against it. I will likely be paying some yarn chicken, but I think I should be okay. So I decided that I'm okay with the amount of yarn chicken that I'm going to be playing. And then, you know, I ultimately didn't buy any yarn for the stick season, so no acquisitions this month, which is really exciting. So that leads me to my September plans. I will say I did get through most of my August plans, which I'm really excited about. I think there are only 2 things that I didn't do. One was I didn't get to knit the bear paw socks, which is now going to be part of my September plans. And so I'm not sure if I remember mentioning this, but I want to knit these for Rhinebeck because I knit Cece a pair for her birthday earlier this year, and there is enough yarn to knit a second pair. And so this is the Bear Paw Socks by Andre Mowry. And so there's enough yarn left over of the bear paw that I got from Farmer Starter Fibers to knit a second pair in the opposite colors. And so that is my goal, is to knit a pair for Rhinebeck, and then we can wear our matching socks because we are that obnoxious. So they definitely are going to get knit, and based on the progress I've made on all of my projects so far, I definitely think that they are going to get knit this month, because I'm not going to have any commute knitting, so I'm going to need commute knitting, and that will be my commute knitting for the month. A pair of socks. I think I can knit a pair of socks in, you know, 4 weeks worth of commute. So that's 4 hours a week times 4 weeks. I should be able to knit a pair of socks, especially because they're DK weight socks. So in terms of my 3 sweaters, so these 3 sweaters are coming with me to Rhinebeck. So I do need to finish them by Rhinebeck. So the Heirloom Quilt Cardigan, which is my official Rhinebeck sweater this year, I plan on finishing that one this month. And so I'd originally planned on finishing them all like within October, but because I'm two weeks ahead on that one, I'm going to plan on finishing that one this month. So again, all I have to do is I have to seam the blocks, and then once I've seamed the blocks, I just need to knit the sleeves and knit the bands. And based on my knitting speed, I can knit a sleeve in 1 day. 2 days if it's like a business day, like during the week. But if I'm not commuting, or if it's a weekend day, I can knit a sleeve in a day, like during my meetings, or you know, in the morning my knitting time, the afternoon knitting time. So I do plan on finishing that one this month. And then I plan on finishing the bodies on both of the drop shoulder sweaters this month. So Stick Season and Tendril, I will work through the body on both of those sweaters, and then that means that in the 3 weeks leading up to Rhinebeck, I have 4 sleeves to knit, which again is very doable because I can knit a sleeve in a day. So I think that this is going to definitely put me still on track to finish everything by Rhinebeck, even though I added a 4th sweater to the mix that I wasn't planning on adding, and I'm really excited about that. So now let's talk about the numbers, and I am so excited about these numbers and the progress that I've made. Oh my god, I'm over the frickin' moon. So numbers. If you are new here, I am trying to stash down this year. And so I didn't have a no-buy plan this year. I just had a plan of using up more yarn than I brought in. And for a while there, I was failing, but I am definitely back on track, and I am so freaking excited. So in August, I had 0 grams in, 0 yards in. No yarn was purchased in the month of August. Round of applause, please. So in terms of usage, so for my yarn out, the way that I count it, it's either yarn that has been like destashed, gifted away, or actually knit up, so the finished object needs to be knit in that month. So like the Heirloom Quilt Cardigan, even though I finished all the squares, I wouldn't count that toward my totals. I will count that toward my totals when I finish the whole sweater. So that's how I count how much yarn has gone out. And so for the month of August, it was 707 grams out, which equals 3,093 yarn, 93 yards of yarn out that was used. And so in this case, I didn't actually, because I added my giveaway yarn to last month's figures. So this was all yarn that was knit. So that is a total net negative. So I came in negative for the month, 707 grams or 3,093 yards. So my year-to-date numbers, my total yarn in, so that is 7,739 grams or 28,338 yards. And so the total yarn out has been 6,143 grams, or 22,358 yards. And so that gives me a total positive, so I have brought in more yarn than I have knit up or destashed this year, of 1,596 grams, or 5,980 yards. And so the reason why I'm so excited about this is because I think I can achieve a net zero for the year. And so the reason I think that is because that is about 3 sweater quantities worth for me. So I think that with my plans for September, if I did the math correctly, it should bring me to a 0. I do plan on acquiring yarn next month. So I am acquiring yarn at Rhinebeck, and I actually plan out my my Rhinebeck purchases so that I, sort of know going in what I want. And so I will be allowing myself 2 sweater quantities and 1 shawl quantity of yarn. And so that means that I'll be bringing that in October, and I should definitely be able to knit that up by the end of the year. After Rhinebeck, I will not be purchasing any more yarn for the rest of the year. I do have an advent coming in November for December, which is the Sweet Sparrow Yarn Advent Calendar, and I do plan on knitting that one up into my blanket in the month, so that will be a net 0. So with my Advent calendar being a net 0, I really only have to account for my Rhinebeck yarn as being a positive into my stash, and I can definitely, between the gift knits that I'm planning for the end of the year and any other sweaters or anything else that I want to knit at the end of the year, I think I can hit a 0. And so that's my new goal for the year, is just to hit a net 0. If I come in negative, that will be like amazing. It'll be just icing on the cake. But I definitely think, and I'm going to aim for, coming in at a net 0 for the year. So I'm really excited. We're not going crazy like Kendra over here, Kendra the Balance Gain. I think, what did she say? She said she can like do a negative 10 or a negative 20,000 or something like that yards in her last video. We're not that ambitious. Kudos to Kendra. She went for it. She went for it. And I'm very proud of her. But I will be very proud of myself if I can come in at a net 0 for the year, which I think I can. And I'm so excited. So that is all that I have for you today. I hope that your September is off to a great start. I know here in the US, most kids have just gone back to school this past week, which means that my coworkers with kids have all had very frenetic energy. It's always an interesting week when kids go back to school. But yeah, I hope that you're enjoying the start to your September, the start to fall. I think hasn't felt very fall-like here. We've actually been in a heat wave for the past couple or the last week or so, which is very strange. Usually by now we will have at least the hints of fall, and then we'll get like a little bit of a warm up at the end of September, and then it like cools down into proper fall in October. But yeah, I hope that wherever you are, you're enjoying the weather. Hopefully it hasn't been as hot as it has been here. Or, I guess you're transitioning into spring in the southern hemisphere. So, yeah, I hope that you're just enjoying all the things. And let me know, as always, what you have been working on as you have been watching today's podcast. And I have a lot of fun plans for the fall. So again, September we're only going to have 2 videos. It's going to be this one, and then I think I'm going to have a sewing podcast at the end of the month. But in October, I definitely have 1, 2, 3, I have 4 videos planned for October. So we're going to have a lot of fun in October, a lot of Rhinebeck related content. If you are going to Rhinebeck, which I will be sure to say again in next month's podcast, but be sure to stop by and say hi if you see me. And yeah, I'm just really excited for the season ahead. I am very basic. I love all the things, pumpkin spice, all the apple pies, everything. I don't like pumpkin pie, but I do like pumpkin spice. So really excited for that. And yeah, I guess I will leave you here. If you enjoy this video, as always, please be sure to do all the things, like, subscribe, and click the bell icon so you're notified every time I post a video. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.